Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seek, Go, Create. This is where we redefine success in leadership, business, and ministry. We share cool topics with cool people. We have great conversations, and you get to listen in. I love doing this because I love having the conversations. And what's really awesome is that you get to just listen in. So welcome. Glad you're here. I'm your host, Tim Winders, coming to you as I usually do from the passenger seat of the RV, and currently in nice, warm, sunny, toasty southern Utah, and about to be traveling though. So I'll be giving you updates from our travels along the way. One thing I want to ask you to do before we get started with our guest here, I'll get to him in just a moment, and you're going to want to listen in on this podcast today because we're going to be having great conversation about overcoming adversity. But one thing I want to mention to you, make sure you continue the conversation, not just as we're having our interview here, but afterwards. You can do that in all the places. You can go to our social media channels. You can go to Twitter. You can go to Facebook. You can go to Instagram. We're even now posting things on TikTok, and we're definitely on YouTube and also all the podcast hosting areas. But what you really want to do is make sure you go to seekgocreate.com. That's seekgocreate.com. And each episode, we have extensive notes with resources and links that will help you out. We pull quotes from the episodes. So if you're listening to this after the podcast releases, make sure you go to the page for this episode and then go down to the bottom and add some comments, have some dialogue with us, converse with us. Keep the conversation going is what we like to say. So make sure that you do that. And if you haven't gotten us your best email address, there's probably a bar up top that'll ask you for your email address just to get bonus content and stay in contact. Make sure you do that. Just give us your email address and we will let you know what's going on. We won't blast your email inbox, but we'll keep you updated on what's going on. Today, we have Christopher Greco as our guest. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at Retail Software Solutions Group, headquartered in Kansas City. His career spans 20 plus years across Fortune 100 companies and startups, successfully scaling growth in almost every position that he has held. He graduated from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., was a White House intern. He achieved his MBA at Florida International University, which was his stepping stone to leading his successful career in business. He's got a book out that we're going to be discussing. He's had a fantastic, interesting, challenging at times life that we're going to be discussing. He's also competed in 4 triathlons. That's impressive. Christopher, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Thanks, Tim. Good to be here. Quick correction I actually was named CEO of RSSG in November.
Ah, okay. So, congratulations.
So, thank you. Some good news there. I joined as Chief Revenue Officer and then was named in November. So yeah, very, very exciting stuff, unexpected.
Excellent. So we may have gotten an older bio there. Well, congratulations. It's good to know that great things are going on. So Christopher, the first question I love to ask, and the audience knows this, and I gave you a little bit of prep on it, but, and you may have given a little glimpse into it just then with that correction there, but if we bump into each other somewhere, we're out and about, we're at an event or doing something, and you and I are chatting, and I just asked the question, Christopher, what do you do? What do you typically tell people?
I hope you realize that your best days are ahead of you.
That's good. And what does that mean for people?
So sometimes we get, stuck. We let little things that get in our way kind of define us for longer than a day, which they shouldn't, right? We everything, no matter how bad it is, will pass. And I think that a lot of people struggle with that, which was one of the impetuses to writing, the second impetus to writing my book. The first, I wanted to leave something for my 2 children to read when they hit their walls. But yeah, I think people get stuck, and I really believe that there's nothing greater than the potential, than human potential. Mm-hmm. And I want people to understand and realize that.
Sure. So, all right, I wasn't going to dive in immediately on this, but because you opened it up, we're going to go ahead and go straight down this path.
Yep.
And what's the biggest thing that keeps people from from achieving those best days? You mentioned it briefly there, but let's go on down it, because I know the book is related to adversity, and we're going to talk more about it later. But what are some things that you observe that can keep people from living those best days?
At a high level, it's just themselves. I mean, the majority of it is that really is themselves and how they view their set of problems or their circumstances. It's in a good friend told me that if you put 5-6 people in a room and everybody write down their problem and throw them in the middle, in the center, and each person grabbed and read the other person's problem, you're likely to take your own problem back. And people have to realize that almost everything is insurmountable. And I'm amazed every day at people who are dealt with a very heavy hand of circumstances that would seem insurmountable. The way they address it is just inspiring. And I think that the more people that realize that find and seek those people, I think that I'm one of them. The better off they'll be. The better off they'll be able to manage their own circumstance, whether no matter where they are in their lives.
Sure. One of the things, I think I wrote this somewhere. I've got some of my notes in front of me, and just so you know, if I'm looking over to the left here, I'm taking notes as we're discussing here.
Yeah, good.
So one of the things that I wrote down as I read the book and I was going through your 8 steps and the other things that you had in there, and it's just perplexing to me in the world that we're in, the way people, well, we've got this odd social media culture. I'll just go ahead and say it this way, where it's very difficult at times to understand what people are going through. Do you believe that everyone has to face some form of adversity along the way?
I don't want them to, but the answer, look, let me just say this. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. Ease is a greater threat to progress and hardship. And I think that I don't want to say that, and I had this discussion with my 14-year-old son just the other day. I don't want to say that people should not go through adversity, but when you do, and you come out on the other side, you are better off for it. And yes, I think that people can find challenges, right? I have no business. I'm not built to swim a mile and a half, bike 55 miles, and run 13 miles in under 6 hours. It's a challenge, right? I chose that challenge. Other challenges choose you. And I think that we have to embrace them, because that is really the only way we grow, when we do things that seem, at first glance, insurmountable.
Yeah. And all right. So I want to go down there and listen, I want to let the listener know there is a great story. I don't know if great's the right word. It's a story that reflects this, that you discuss in the book, and we'll get to it shortly. Yep. About something you went through with your family. But you brought up your 14-year-old, and it kind of, my mind just kind of went in a tangent for a brief moment about how we are raising our children now. And I notice it because I've got a grandchild. We just went and spent the weekend with our granddaughter.
You're a young grandfather.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, actually, I'm 57. I look, maybe don't look at it, whatever. But one of the things I noticed is she's 13 months old and she's toddling around, and she toddles around. And of course she kind of does the weird waddle walk, and then will plop down on her bottom. Yep. And so my wife and I took her out on a walk, went to the park and all that. And we had this tendency to jump down every time she wobbled to keep her from falling. And it got me thinking exactly about this topic. You said you were having this conversation with your 14-year-old. You were roughly that age when you went through an extremely difficult challenge that we'll talk about in just a few moments. But how do we prepare people, or the next generation, our children, grandchildren, whatever, to deal with adversity, short of just going through the issues that you went through? How are you doing it with your children? I mean, I know we're not, does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, you on the one hand, at hard as it is, you have to let them fall. Let them experience, rejection, a little amount of pain. And I'm not saying in the physical sense, right? Yeah. I always tell my 14-year-old, there's no such, I don't believe in participation trophies, right? There are people who come out ahead and those who don't. I also don't believe in playing victim. I think that I thought you were going there, Tim, before we were talking about our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter society, but there's too many people playing victim. I mean, grow up, get to work, and you have a dream, protect it, go after it. Don't stop. Don't blame the things around you. That's a theme. That's one of the steps in the, in the book. And I, develop a self-sufficient mindset. And I think that, going back to your 18-month-old and my 14-year-old, I think you have to. It's a matter of teaching them, and maybe you'll be at one point, when your 18-month-old is old enough, you'll tell them maybe an adversity story you have, or your wife has, or a friend. I think so. I share these stories with my son constantly. When he looks at like an athlete, as a hockey player, I research it. Well, what was Wayne Gretzky's background, right? What did Michael Phelps do to become the greatest Olympian of all time, right? These kids see the game day. They don't see the training days and what they had to overcome to get there. So in absence of them experiencing their own, adversity, and it'll happen, I don't think anybody can escape it, one way or the other. I don't know anybody who is not or has not dealt with something that has been difficult, in the past. So I share those stories with I taught a high school class recently. My kids, my son's friends, and they become better off for it, because I think it makes them think differently.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it, I was just thinking as you were saying that, one of the things that we did, I'll just, with our granddaughter, is I would allow, this is the way my wife and I play off each other, I would allow her to plop down on her bottom. My wife was trying to scoop her up. One thing I didn't do is I didn't put her at the top of the monkey bars at, the age that she's at, and say, hang on, and, learn how to fall, learn how to deal with it. And so I do think that as a leader, and we're going to talk about your leadership role in the company you're in now, because I think all this relates to all areas of life. But the trigger, and I'm not going to forget about the victim or victor, because I did have that written down in my notes, victim or victor here, but I wanted to circle back to it later. But when you said ease, it just kind of made me go down that path, especially when you brought it down, because everything about it, our culture seems to want to make things easy for people. I think our government, our society, our structure, our parents, all of that. But yet, I love what you said. We all have to go through something. And I'm wondering at times if we're just kicking the can down the road, because I know for myself, I went through challenges, not like yours at the time that you did as a teenager. My wife actually did. Her parents went through things. Mother attempted suicide when she was a teenager. And I think a lot of people go through stuff. My big hurdle was later in life with a business failure that I would not wish it on anyone, but I'm a better person because of it. And I think that's the tough thing about this topic. What are your thoughts?
I think as it relates to this, making things easy, that doesn't help you. That doesn't help you grow. If you take the easiest opportunities, your likeliness. Let me say this: if you take the easy road, there's people who are going to take the hard road. Right? You take the easy road, people taking the hard road, and I think the people taking the hard road are going to grow, and they're going to grow. They're going to learn more, and they're going to grow faster than you. So the idea of making everything easy cripples us. You have to take on challenges, and again, adversity will find you. Whether you decide to take the challenge on or not, that's just life. Life isn't necessarily fair. but it's something the challenges that life presents to you should be embraced, because you apply yourself, you will get past it almost no matter the circumstance.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
good.
I remember my brother, who was really one of the heroes of my book. I remember when he if you read his story, he actually served three tours in Afghanistan, 15-month tours. He was an attack helicopter pilot for one of those tours. Then two other tours, he actually did more logistics, but he was in a forward base. And he was debating whether to stay or quit, or quit the army, because it became so tough for him. And I remember it was just a matter of having a conversation about, what are you looking to do? What is the reason why you're quitting? And it came down because it was hard. That's never a good reason. That's never a good reason, especially when his goals was to become a pilot, serve his country, and take that experience into the private sector, which he's successfully doing now. And he thanks me every day, for having that conversation. I think maybe not for the last tour that he did, but nevertheless, he's accomplished more than I'll ever accomplish, in life, given what he was up against and the decisions he made with bravery.
Yeah, it sounds like a good big brother kick in the backside is kind of what you did there, possibly. I'm sure you did it with love, right?
Totally. He's my hero.
Very good. All right. And in just a moment, I want us to really dive into, the 8 steps to overcoming everyday adversity, the book. But before I do that, Christopher, we've got a lot of leaders, a lot of business people. We've actually had a lot of people in ministry also that are in leadership roles that listen in. And so I think it would be valuable, especially with, one of the things that you mentioned right when we started, is for us to go ahead and apply some of these skills, lessons, whatever we want to call them, in the business world. Because you say you're now the CEO of this startup. You've had a lot of different roles in business. You've generated this number I have. It could be more now, over 400 million in value over your career. Let's talk about adversity, but let's talk about what you've pulled from it in the business world, specifically business and leadership roles. And then what we're going to do is we're going to circle back. I'm going to have you tell the story of the book. So I'm just giving the listener and you a little bit of our roadmap, but let's talk business first. Share with us some lessons that you have brought into the roles that you filled in companies and corporations.
Sure. Well, I can give you a present day lesson that was imparted upon me. If you look at the industry we serve, so my company, Retail Software Solutions Group, we basically help independent retailers thrive. And these independent retailers are smaller, hometown, grocers. They have, from your single store shop all the way to multi-billion-dollar operations of 100 stores or more. When you look at the past year and the fact what they had to deal with, right? All the workers showed up, right? And they didn't have the PPE equipment. They were lacking some were lacking inventory. They found a way to get stuff, on their shelves. There's a story of a grocer. The owner got sick. The trucks were coming. It was just him and his wife. His wife was taking care of him. He had no one to go ahead and, stock the shelves. I don't want to go into the 8 different hats a grocer will wear, but the people in the town showed up to stock the shelves. And so my point is that when you can always find a way to overcome whatever hardship is in front of you. And one of the greatest lessons that I always say is that you want to overcome your personal hardship or whatever's against you, help the person next to you. There's something magical when you do that, because it almost validates you, right? The same way my company is helping these independent grocers, thrive, and we get a ton of satisfaction to see the fact that we're able to go ahead and help them become more profitable while maintaining prices for consumers. Sorry for the little ad plug, but what we're doing is our software does amazing things for retailers and the consumers buying these goods. But with that said, it's amazing to watch what happens when somebody who is struggling actually puts their own personal struggles aside and says, when they see an opportunity to help somebody, they do it, and they don't sit with a woe is me syndrome. And I think that's important. So that's a present day example. The other example I'll give, and kind of the reason why I love these startups, is that startups are so hard. They're so hard. I mean, we're 20 people. We're not a big corporation. Everybody needs to show up every day, and I mean not just physically show up, just show up and get done what needs to get done. And we can't afford really even one person for not pulling their weight. And but they're people, right? So they have their own hardships that they might deal with at home that are outside of the office. And I think that one of the things I bring is, hey, tomorrow's a better day, right? Let's work through what's going on today. Let me help you. But tomorrow is a better day, and your best days are ahead of you. And I think that in a startup, that's important because it's a game of minimizing mistakes. A corporation can make a ton of mistakes, right? They have hundreds of millions and billions of dollars and hundreds and thousands of employees. We don't. So it's a really good fit for me. It's a challenge that I really wake up, at 4:35 a.m. every day, embracing.
It's interesting. You brought up a point, and I knew this, but you saying it just, I guess, emphasized it even more, that there is no room for dead weight within a startup. That's my words. I didn't. That's not exactly what you said. But I've worked in a large corporation right when I came out of Georgia Tech in college, and I looked around and I often thought to myself, what do these people do here? There were just people that were there, and in many ways, I think they hindered the advancement of what the company's mission was versus helped it. But in startup mode, everybody's rowing. Everybody's got to be in that boat and going at it. And so I appreciate you saying that, which kind of leads to a question. We're recording this in, I guess, late winter, spring of 2021. And the actual video and podcast might be released, later spring, early summer. But at the time of recording this, we are coming up on the 12-month mark of what was a worldwide pandemic. Major impact on, I know, your clients, probably your business. And many would say that they may not have seen that type of adversity in their lives. Talk about organizations and businesses dealing with adversity, because we're going to talk about your book, and that's really focused on the individual, which organizations are made up individuals. But you know what, we saw restaurants and, like you said, your independent grocers and others that had to deal with it. So give us some things that you observed that people did well and they didn't do well over the last 12 plus months.
Yeah. So the way I would answer is in a couple of ways, Tim. I think it's a great question. I will always bet on my people. I will always bet on my people. What happened in cities, governors, mayors, politicians, they didn't bet on their people. They said, I know what's best for you. And we don't. And so I think that when, I remember I was actually on spring break when the whole shutdown happened. It was like, boom, it was 4 p.m. We're having a grand old time, and 6 p.m. Everything where we were was completely shut down, and it's just swing to the extreme. And I just don't think that was, that was right. I don't think that people really understand how to deal, how to write. Let's call it the governments didn't understand how to write or run a policy on dealing with adversity. Let's just say that, right? There's a policy, right? I remember going back to my book. because they weren't transparent about what was happening. When you're transparent, you give people the information and let them decide how to manage it, right? And some people watching this might say, "Oh, that's so extreme. There's all these."
It is controversial. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be, but it is, right?
You can run data. You can run data on states and regions. I mean, I go to rural parts of the country. They're run very, very differently than the cities. People say, "Oh, well, there's better social distancing." Fine. My point is that the response was very myopic. It was stop COVID at all costs, and I don't think that we came out on the better side of that. I think there'll be a lot of lessons learned.
Yeah, and listen, it's unfortunate that this is so controversial because from the way you're speaking, I could tell you and I have very similar views about this. I believe that people need to have some personal responsibility. Give them the information. Yep. Listen, there's a virus. There's really a virus out here, and it really is causing some damage. But, and at the time of doing this, there are a number of states. I don't think it's going to end. I think that there's going to be some areas that still are in the mode of removing the adversity from people or attempting to, but not doing it well. And then others are going to say, it's going back to that, what we brought up earlier with your 14-year-old is, they're trying to make it easy. We're trying to make this go away. We're doing all of these things. And I do believe that there's going to be long-term repercussions about it. Something that just jumped to my mind, and I'm going to get your thoughts on it and just see what you think. Yep. I wonder if it has a difference. There's the difference is perceiving people as victors or victims. The ones that look at everyone as victims treat people a certain way, and the ones that think people they're victors look at it another way. Am I applying that correctly? What are your thoughts?
Well, the way you look at it is defined by whether you see the potential in humans or you don't.
Yes.
It's just that simple. It is that simple. And, again, your listeners they might debate this, but if you believe in the true potential of human, you will let them run unfettered, and you will give them just the amount of support that's needed, and not overburden them with too much support where you actually crush their spirit. And make them choose all this great support that I'm having versus let me go out on my own and make something, of myself. There's not enough people who are delivering that type of vision. It's not that you have this potential inside of you. You can get over it, whether it's an individual or organization, right? And I think it's something that I think that I credit my parents, and then after my father passed, my mother, where she always said, you can do anything you put your mind to, right? She over-indexed. She was mom, over-indexed. We could do almost anything I think I put in the book, right? I'm not gonna be able to score against a professional basketball player ever. They can spot me 60 points. The score will be 120-0. Okay. With that said, there are things that we can accomplish, and we can have a great life realizing our abilities and applying them. But I think that going back to your victim versus victor, I think that we are, if you were to look at our society, maybe just even 10 years ago, we are on the victor side. And I think that what's being communicated is now moving more towards the victim side. And I think that's very dangerous. It weakens us as a society, and that permeates down through our institutions, and it sets expectations especially for young people coming out of schools, finding their next stage in life, right? Mm-hmm. Think about how many entrepreneurs out there that you might crush by preaching that garbage, right? So, I like to think that we need to do a better job of believing in the potential of humans, the potential of organizations, let them run unfettered, trust them that they know what they're doing, give them the support when they ask for it.
Hmm.
Give them support and then sometimes you might need to do it when they don't know, right? That's okay, but you can't overburden them, because you basically crush that spirit and their ability to learn and grow.
Yeah, and all right, so that is so good because there was something that I wanted to discuss later that's within the book that I'm going to go ahead and pull it up to now because I think it relates. You actually referenced Carol Dweck's book Mindset within your book,
Yep.
8 Steps to
Yep.
Overcoming Everyday Adversity, which is kind of a foundational book in what I do with coaching and strategic coaching for executive teams and leaders. Because I don't think we need to group people. We have to be careful identifying groups like rich, poor, color, male, female, all of that. But mentally, I look at people as having a fixed or a growth mindset. And so, as you were talking about victim or victor, and talking about the structure we're in, I all of a sudden started thinking about that fixed or growth mindset because it relates to this one topic that we're discussing, in that, are we dealing with people that are fixed? Are we dealing with them that are growth? Am I tying those together okay?
That you are. I mean, I can tell you that we've already in the training is part of the DNA of our company. We're always training, right? So we're ready on game day. And one of the precepts in her book, on the growth mindset side, the person who has a growth mindset celebrates the success of others. Celebrates success of others. And I think I know the fixed mindset, it's almost an envy of other success. And that's not healthy. So yes, you're looking at it correctly. And I would say your assessment is correct in the fact that society might be more on to the fixed side, versus focusing on growth.
Yeah.
I think it's something that, growth mindset. I read that book a decade ago, and I actually passed the principles on it to my son, so he knows that he can get after everything.
Yeah, and it kind of, just like you were saying, it kind of goes into that victim. A victim doesn't believe they can change. They don't believe they can grow or do anything. They are that victim. And probably in all likelihood, that's the big conflict that we're dealing with in our society and culture in our first world. We could go
Yep.
down that path even more, but what I want to do is I want to begin moving into some of the discussion of the overcoming everyday adversity that you lay out in your
Okay.
book. But above all else, Christopher, I believe we need to lay a foundation for, really, in many ways, the story that the book revolves around. To me, it's the story of a childhood event that occurred for you. And I don't want to take away from the book. I think people need to read it. I loved the succinctness of it and all the things covered. But let's
Yep.
back up and let's talk about you growing up in Miami, and just kind of go
Yep.
over the situation that was a catalyst. I think people go through these in their lives many times, but this was a catalyst and a big catalytic event for you. So tell us about it. I want to hear it in your own words, and then we're going to cover a couple of the 8 steps from the book, if that's okay by you.
Yep, sure. So the event. So my father was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and from diagnosis to his death was about 8 months. And as life would have it, I came home from my very first football game, which my dad really pushed, and I was a good player. And he just wasn't well enough to see me for that first game. But when I came home, he died about an hour later, and I was there. I think the writer that I partnered, I wrote the book, but I needed a professional writer to really bring the story out. So Fern Pessin, I hope she sees this podcast. She was a phenomenal writing partner, and she really helped shape the story and kind of bring the readers into that day, September 20th, 1987, and what that was like, for me and my mother and my 4-year-old sister, who was there when it happened. I called without going too much in the book, I watched my childhood priest give my father his last rites. And then my brother came home, and we grieved together. And the next few months was very, very tough. But where God looked down on me and blessed me was with other men and women that really helped my mother and helped raise me. When my mother, was working, or occupied my free time, gave me lessons, was very bullish on teaching and actually kind of parenting as best they could. So I was lucky to have that. And so I'm grateful for it. But that event, it never leaves you. I mean, I wrote this book almost 32 years later, and that's really the fact. I've thought about writing the book probably for a decade, and then you finally have to just sit down, put pen to paper, 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning for 4 nights a week for about a year, and then you have something and say, okay, let me take it to a publisher. But that story. It affects my mother today, and I know it affects my siblings today. But we're all successful, and we look at it a challenging time in our lives that we overcame, and the lessons from that event and how we responded after are represented, I think, fairly well in the book.
Yeah, and I do want to give great praise for, I guess, the actual story. And we hate to make light of the event, but we all know that there's certain ways that you can share, the details of an event. And you and I think you mentioned Fern. I can't remember the name, but y'all did a great job of telling that story. So I do want to praise you for that, because I was instantly drawn in and intrigued, and was just enthralled by the story of it that I knew were actual events. I'm not making light of the actual events, but there's a few things that I want to ask about. And this, gosh, I hope this doesn't get a little bit weird here, but hopefully the listener will give respect for this conversation, and I'm hopeful that I can respectfully ask. Oh. You were in the room as your father passed, and it was, you may have been somewhat aware that it was coming, but maybe you were denying it or something like that. I was in a room when my grandmother passed. And there is something that's so intriguing about being there when someone I like the word pass instead of dies, but they pass from this realm to the other realm based on our spiritual beliefs. We'll talk about spiritual in just a moment, but specifically witnessing that passing. What can you share about that for possibly someone who's never seen that? They may have fear of death. It may scare them. Anything else? I mean, because for me, it actually was I say this really respectfully, it was a beautiful thing to see the passing of my grandmother. She was well into her 90s, but anyway, does that question make sense? I mean, it's kind of different that a lot of people don't witness that. Share what you can, Christopher.
It does. So I'll answer it this way. I think I was 15 years old, and I was too immature and maybe emotional to realize what was going on. And what I realized today, which I wish I realized more at that moment, was that he suffered tremendously. I mean, it was a year ago. He was running through an obstacle course, beating all the other dads. He was an athlete. He was an old dad. He got married when he was 43 or actually 44. But it's amazing how things can change just in a year. But I was too immature to realize what's going on. But what I realize now is that his suffering was over. I knew that after Father Ron gave him his last rites, that he was in heaven. And I didn't realize that back then, but I realize it now, and I do reflect on it. I can tell you that my mother, and it's one of the things I respect about her, and people might say, well, why would a mother tell their 15-year-old son this? It was probably in the March, or he was diagnosed in February. I think it was in the March or April timeframe. It was a short time thereafter, and she was an operating room nurse. She was in she and she was at a New York hospital. That's where she got her primary training, right in Manhattan. And then we moved down to Miami. She said to me, she's like, "Look, your dad's not going to make it at Christmas." Right. I mean, I'm like, and I'm like, why would she, at the time, my maturity, why would you tell me that? Well, now looking back on it as an adult, as a parent, well, she needed to talk to someone. And we had no family there. I mean, she had some friends, but she felt that she had to tell me, and it actually prepared me for the day, because I didn't expect it. I expected to come home and tell my dad that, I played in my first football game, and I did well. And it wasn't even an hour to where my mother, would start calling me in the room and, hey, this is, say, hey, say goodbye to your father.
And thank you for sharing that, because the value of having conversations that very few people experience certain things. And I know that's probably one of the reasons you wrote the book. I'll ask that in just a moment. But there's kind of one other, I guess, maybe sensitive question. You're very candid, so it's not a big deal. But I really look at catalytic events, and I've done it with myself a few times, and I've asked myself, what would have happened? And this is just part of me trying to learn. I'm constantly in that growth mindset. I could tell you are too. So you may have had this thought, but you were 15 years old when this event occurred. Have you put any thought to what might have happened had you been 25, or had you been 5 or 45, or any of those? How significant was 15-year-old Christopher experiencing this event?
I don't know if it was I don't know if it was more or less worse than experiencing it at another time in your life, right? You could argue it both ways. When you're 15, you're impressionable. I think you start getting your legs under you. You're starting to grow into becoming a man. You're a young man becoming a man. You're thinking about your future. And you want your parents to be a part of it, right? And I think that hit pretty hard. So maybe it's we have to do another show. We can bring my siblings on. You can get this perspective from 11 and 4, right? I think that the fact that little changed from our day to day. And what I mean by that is that we did not, you look at a 15-year-old, one of the things I thought about, oh God, I'm not going to be able to go to private school anymore because we can't afford it. No, my mom picked up a second shift at the hospital. She's like, we're going to crank through this, but here's how we're all going to get through it together. Christopher, here's what you have to do. John, you need to do, and we got to take care of, your 4-year-old sister because she's too young. So very little change there. And I think that was interesting to see that and remember that as a 15-year-old, because I can tell you that my brother and I do share in the fact that experience really makes us look at problems and challenges differently, that anything's surmountable, right? But again, having experienced it at any age, you can argue that there's really not. It's really not more or less worse, no matter what the age. When you lose a parent, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough. It'd be hard for me now. I mean, my father would have grandkids, and my son would realize what was going on and watching him, break down. If my father was still alive and he passed, I think that'd be tough for me to see. So it's tough at any age.
Yeah, and listen, it was probably kind of one of these odd questions, maybe because currently I'm dealing with my father, who's in his 80s, is dealing with dementia, cognitive issues, and really doesn't even know who I am, and his great-grandchildren, grandchildren, all that. So it's kind of an odd thing. But I want to shift a little bit and ask the question as we go into the book discussion. I think it was early on in the book or somewhere I read that you made the statement from a faith standpoint that you believe that God is good. And I wrote in my notes, this is not my belief, but I wanted to ask the question. I wrote God is good with a question mark, because many people would have asked questions like you did at 15. And I think you reference Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Stages of Death book, and,
Yep.
all those and all. I'll let people go to the book and get your
Yeah, it's very
discussion of it.
that was very scientific.
Yes, yeah, very good. So, but from a faith standpoint, you make the statement that God is good, and there are some people listening in right now. And Christopher, I want us to communicate directly to the person listening, saying, what kind of God would allow a 15 and an 11 and a 4-year-old and, a mother who's working to be robbed of their father at that time? Or a 15-year-old would ask the question and think maybe they were robbed of their teen years, and we're kind of going back to the victim thing earlier, but respond to someone that's going through that line of thinking, oh man, what a bad deck of cards that he was dealt by God.
Yeah. I'll answer it this way. It's not up for us to judge or decide that. Right. I mean, it's part of, I've reconciled the fact that the things that happen are part of God's plan, and we should, and yeah, we could, it's not wrong to question it. I mean, I wasn't a fan of God after my father died. Let me be clear on that. I was not a fan.
So you're not a fan. I love that. Not a fan of God. And you saw the priest come in. So do you recall any of your, I don't know, anger? What was your interaction with God during that time?
I was very angry. My brother reminds me of that. He remembers how emotional and angry I was. He's not an emotional guy. That's why he's a pilot, right? He's very, he's cold as ice, which is how you want to be as a pilot. But I was very emotional, and I was angry at God. I stopped going to church, and but people pull you back in. And I think that I asked that same question that you just asked, is like, if he's so good, then why is he making it so tough on me? It's like, it's not yours to question. Keep your faith and understand that your best days are ahead of you, because God has a plan for you, and that he rewards those who keep the faith. And I trusted that advice, and it's worked for me. You look at there's people who there's Catholics. You might know who I'm talking about, but there's a particular Catholic. He was a Catholic, and now he's a self-proclaimed humanist. And you look at these humanists, nothing is bigger than them, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing's bigger than them. And I don't know how you go through life thinking that nothing is bigger than you, right? That there can't be something that's that's all encompassing, inspiring. And I've never thought that way. I've always known there was a guy. I was angry at him, and I ran in the opposite direction, but I came back. And I think that's what, that's what matters. So, would I thank God? So here's the question: when I'm standing in front of him, would I say, "Hey God, thank you for taking my dad"? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Probably not. I would thank him. For guiding me and never leaving my shoulder, and making sure that, and giving me the tools and the abilities and the foresight to overcome it. That's what I would thank him for. And I would ask anybody else going through the same thing, going through their adversity, to do the same.
Right. And
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it actually does. It's very good, because everybody goes through stuff, and my thought process is it doesn't necessarily come from God, but he'll use it for good. That's what I believe in a lot of these situations. We're in a world that there's stuff going on. So, all right, I want to make sure I've got plenty of time to have some discussions about the book here. So I'm watching our time here, but First question. All right. Again, I read the book here in the last 36 hours, so it's pretty fresh in my mind, but I don't have it in front of me. So a lot of it I'm just trying to recall because it's actually on my
Yep.
iPad that's being charged right now. But eight steps to overcoming everyday adversity. You mentioned it
Yep.
earlier. 32 years from this event that occurred. You've lived a lot of life. You've succeeded. Probably had some other struggles and adversity along the way. Had your own
Yep.
children. Why did you decide to write this book? I don't want to say all of a sudden, but
Yep.
why now? Why are you writing? Why'd you write the book now?
Primary reason I wanted to leave something for Jonathan and Amanda, my 14 and 10-year-old. That was priority number one. I think that there'll be a time in their lives where they'll pick it up and they'll read it. Right. I always thought that I really didn't have any artifacts. I have some things in my father's, but nothing like a book, right? Or a recording. I remember seeing him on a video. I'm short, like 20-second video clip of him when I was 14 years old. It was about a year before he died. Not that was special, and I kept it. My best friend sent it to me, and so my impetus was to leave something for my kids. And then the second reason why I wrote it is I just scratched my head on why people seem to get stuck so easily. And adversity comes and they're almost become paralyzed and they can't push past it. And so, I said, okay, I have a story to tell, but the story isn't enough. Let's think back and what are the steps I took? I didn't say I need 8 steps or 5. I said, what are the steps I took? And I employed them one at a time, not necessarily, consequentially, not necessarily all together at once, but I did apply a step at some period in my life, and I still apply them. And I think that it was relevant to write a book that was very direct, non-repetitive. It's short. The book is only 120 pages, right? It was an easy read. You can read it on a flight from San Francisco to Kansas City, which was my intent because I've flown that route, probably over 200 times, helping scale a startup. But I wanted to have something, again, to leave for my kids. And then if it made an impact on others, look, what a good friend of mine, he's actually wrote a testimony in the book, Admiral Bill Owens. He actually was the vice chair of the Joint Chiefs under President Bill Clinton. He and I have met years ago in Barcelona. We shared a cab to the airport and we had a great conversation. I kept in touch with him over the years. And then I just happened to send him, a manuscript of my book. Said, hey, Bill, would you just read it and give me feedback? Not only did he read it, he returned it. I read it in 24 hours and sent me an email. It says, Chris, if you're open to a testimonial, go ahead and use this. And I'm like, wow, a guy this accomplished, right? Naval Academy grad, served under, was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff under, President Bill Clinton, very well accomplished businessman as well. And, and that was like validation that I have something here. And so I proceeded and published and it's starting to get some attention. It's slow, but it's starting to get some attention. So I'm pretty proud of it. And I think I'll look back at being one of the greatest accomplishments after marrying my wife and having my kids in my life.
Sure. So really, there wasn't the 8 steps as you started. You were really just reflecting back and seeing how you overcame that situation and others. Is that correct?
Yep. It was a story. And I said, look, what I went through there. I mean, there's people have overcome things much harder than I have. I mean, there's a lot of inspiration out there. I mean, the inches of inspiration are around us. You just got to know where to look and grab it and understand it, internalize it, and apply the lessons that you read or watch. So I started out with a story, and then I said, you know what, I'm gonna provide some advice, and I'm gonna pay it forward because I've gotten great advice. I've gotten such great advice that it would have been a sin if I did not provide if I did not provide advice on what I did to overcome my personal circumstance.
Sure. Writing is a very interesting process. I've recently gone through it myself.
Yep.
And something that I'm intrigued by, I ask this with most people that are authors, maybe not all, but I'll go ahead and ask with you. What did you learn about yourself during the writing process of the book? And obviously you had achieved a good bit of overcoming this adversity, but specifically the book, in writing it and putting the story down on paper, working with you, an expert, a coach. I've had a writing coach also. What'd you learn about yourself?
That if I make a decision, all I need to do is make a decision and apply myself, and the results will follow. It's hard writing a book. I'm married. I was traveling.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started the book, I think in 2018. Yeah, late 2018. Late 2018, and then I started working with a publisher in 2019 and published in 2020. But I was traveling. On a bad year over the 7 years with the startup, I was traveling. I did 50, 60 flights a year. One year I did almost 90. So, and I would have to find time. And it's not like you can write on a plane. You've got to be like in a very quiet area in solitude. And so I said, if I'm going to get this done, I need to get up a few hours ahead of everybody else. So I just made a commitment that I would just get up, and it aggravated my wife because she's a light sleeper. The alarm would go off. And then eventually I was able to start getting it myself. But, I learned that I can apply myself. I learned that I have discipline. I learned that I have a story to tell. I've learned that I have a good message that other people should hear. I learned that that writing is very rewarding because it clarifies your thoughts. I think it's made me a better business person. I also think that you don't look for the reward for writing, because if you're in it to sell books, then don't do it. Don't do it. It's a hard business. But if you're doing it for the right reasons, then do it. And the number one reason was writing it for my kids.
Yeah. So do you consider this, is it a how-to or is it an autobiography? What would it be, or both, or a little bit of both?
I don't like hybrids, but it's a hybrid, because I think that you can't tell one without the other. You have to have the story to talk about the 8 steps, right? And you have to have the 8 steps to really really magnify the story,
right?
To apply the lessons learned from the story.
So some people, and again, I like to try to get into the head a little bit of the listener, because that's me. I'm one who's just curious about it. Many times when someone sees something that says 3 steps, 5 steps, 7, 8, there's a slight tinge of cynicism that creeps in on me and says, are there really 8 easy steps? Is it that formulaic? So I'll just kind of ask it that way. Is it really a formula? Is it just steps? Is it guidelines? You listed them as steps, but anyway, is that a good question? You know what I mean by the question? Is like, because you're a business guy, you see a lot of books. You go through the airport, you see 7 steps to this and 5 steps and do this and blah, blah, blah. So respond to that, because 8 steps to overcoming kind of has someone saying, well, wow, it must be easy.
Yep. So things always take longer and are harder than what they initially seem, right? Things always take longer and are harder than what they initially seem. So the 8 steps is not one size fits all. If someone were to take one step, just apply one of the steps, whether it's affirm, I'm not a victim, develop a self-sufficient mindset, understand that prayer is the bridge between panic and peace, or is the gateway between panic and peace. Apply one of those. It's going to be a big leap. It's not a step. It's a leap, I should say. I should say these 8 leaps to overcome every day, because of the feedback that I've gotten. But it's not a one size fits all. And I think that it's a good book to have as a reference. But it takes time to overcome whatever is troubling you. And I think this book is honest about that, but it is also evidence-based, because these worked. These really worked. And I didn't realize it at the time. And I'm not necessarily, you need this book to overcome. You don't. Whatever you're going through, you got it. You already have it inside of you. Maybe this book calls it out a little bit and helps you realize something that you didn't realize you had. So I hope that answers your question. Again, it was a bit longer, but yeah, again, it doesn't, it's not a one size fits all.
No, that's good. And you also gave a few of the steps in there, which I appreciate. And there was one specific item that I want to ask as we're getting close to wrapping up here. I've got a few questions as we finish up.
Yep.
But you actually listed out some of the daily habits that you implemented. It looked like, or it seemed like it was shortly after your father had passed away. And you mentioned you swam multiple times a day and some other things like that. And the question that I had related to that, and you could talk briefly about which step that was, because I don't know that I wrote down which step I pulled that from. But the question that I had was, is there a momentum that occurs when one starts overcoming? Because I think that I'm real big on momentum, being an engineer, that we can kind of get momentum going in all directions. Did you notice momentum, and how important are the daily habits there? Talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah. So step 4, establish a routine.
Yes.
And what I would do, and I noticed that I started writing my activities down and realized how many hours I had in the day, which was dead doing unproductive work. And so I found out that, you know what, I could swim 3 hours a day, or 5 days a week. I just got to get up a little bit earlier, right? I could make time to rest. I could spend more time on homework, and establishing a routine means writing it down. And as tactical as that seems, you develop a habit around it, because when you're you get to a point where you don't necessarily have to write it down, but you realize when you're idle, and you find things to do that moves you forward, not just create busy work. My college roommates will laugh telling you this, but my freshman year of college, I put up a schedule Monday through Sunday right above my desk. I think it was like 6 a.m. to maybe 10 p.m. Everybody knew every hour of the day. And I would sometimes walk into my dorm room where people like talking about, some would laugh at it. Others would be like, wow, this is great. I need to do this. Right. And the routine was important. I wish more young people actually, wrote their, had a schedule. I think they'd come out ahead.
Yeah. And that was the first thought that I had in looking at it, was just the momentum that you created. And it's funny, in an environment that, university setting, where people should be establishing habits for success in life, where they're making fun of you for having habits, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they were, I think they were of course, joking. Some were like very serious about it, but yeah, I think establish a routine. I didn't realize what I was doing at the time. Like, God, that's a step. That's an important step. But where does it, where does it fit? And actually, it's funny. People ask about that one pretty frequently. Yeah. And I thought it was the simplest one to apply. Right. All you got to do is just write it. Time on the y-axis is time. X-axis, the things, the activities. Go. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
correct. And so
in leadership business, in many of the conversations we have, daily habits, routines, morning habits, all of those things come up as success principles over and over again. So, Christopher, you started this by saying that you help people realize that their best days are ahead of them.
Yep.
Is that what this book does?
The feedback I've gotten, that I've received would suggest that it does. And I know that when I look back on how I applied the 8 steps, I have been better because of it, after applying it than I was before. So I think it's a pursuit. I don't know if you ever do we ever achieve it? But I've gotten that question quite a bit, and I'll answer it like this: is that what's the alternative to thinking any differently? What's the alternative? Is that a better alternative to not think that your best days are? And my mother's 83. She has dementia as well. She will still say to me, your best days are ahead of you. And sometimes say, you know what, my best days are ahead of me. Though I don't know if that's true anymore, Christopher, is what she'll say. But yeah, my mother, that's not my phrase. That's my mother's phrase, by the way. She would always say that. And she would say it with such affirmation. Best days are ahead of with the hand gestures and everything.
Well,
so
again, I read the book and I would agree. I think that if people apply 1, 2, 4, 8 of the principles and are blessed by the story you told of your father passing and the impact it had, I believe that it will help people in that process of knowing that their best days are ahead. Christopher, I've enjoyed so much. I would love to dive into all 8, but we're going to leave that for the listener to go get the book. How can people connect with you? Where can they find the book? Where can they find you? Give anything you want to here. Sure. We'll include it in the notes so people can find it.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. So you can go to my website, ChristopherGreco.org. That's ChristopherGreco.org. You could also find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/Chris Greco. And also you can find me, come to my company, which is very simple, rssg.com, and you can find me that way as well.
Yeah. Well, Christopher, I appreciate the conversation. I knew I would when I started looking through the book and reading. As I said, Christopher and I are going to have a great conversation. And before we started, you said, you could call me Chris. I said, no, I'm going to call you Christopher because I love that name. So Christopher. So, hey, Christopher, we are Seek, Go, Create here. And those are those 3 words. Which one of those words jumps out at you or resonates with you more than the other 2?
Go. Yeah, I that because the go is the action, and people will say, well, we got a plan, you got to go, you got to run, you got to apply yourself, you got to take action. So the Seek, Go, Create, go always would be my number 1 out of those 3 words.
Excellent, Christopher. Thank you so much. I highly encourage you, if you're listening, to go get a copy of his book, connect with Christopher, stay in contact. And I want to thank you for listening in. Yeah, he's got a copy there, so check that out. I've got a digital copy myself. So what a great conversation. As we said at the beginning, if you've enjoyed this, continue the dialogue. Jump to one of our social channels, to YouTube or the podcast platform, our website, seekgocreate.com. Continue the conversation. If you bring up a question or anything we need Christopher to get involved with, we'll bring him back in and answer your question. And also, thank you for listening in. I always appreciate you listening, sharing, following, subscribing. Next week, another great guest. We drop episodes every Monday. And until then, continue being all that you were created to be.